Well, good evening, everyone. The council has just returned from closed session, but we have not finished. So we will be going back into closed session at the end of this meeting. And if there is any reportable action from tonight's closed session, we will report out on that at our August 10th meeting. And I will now ask our city attorney if there was any reportable action from our closed session from 3 weeks ago at the end of June.
There was no reportable action.
Thank you very much. All right, so we will call now to order the city council meeting of the city of Atascadero, and I will ask Mayor Pro Tem Newsom to lead us in a pledge to the flag.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bourbeau.
Here.
Councilmember Daris.
Here.
Councilmember Funk.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
Here.
Mayor Moreno.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Well, if you are watching or listening to our city council this evening, we welcome you. And if you would like to speak during the time set aside for community forum or during public comment of any of our agenda items, please call 805-538-2888 to provide public comment via phone. Of course, if you're on the webinar tonight, when it comes time for public comment or community forum and you want to speak, you can press the little raise hand icon at the bottom of the webinar and we will call on you. When you do call in, if you're calling on the phone, please let us know which item it is you'd like to speak on. And again, that number is 805-538-2888. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Also move. I'll second.
Second. All right. We've got a motion by Councilmember Funk and a second by Councilmember Bourbeau, and we will waive the reading in full of all ordinances appearing on this agenda. And the titles of the ordinances will be read aloud by the city clerk at the first reading, after the motion, and before the city council votes. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Funk.
Yes.
Councilmember Bourbeau.
Yes.
Councilmember Daris.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And we have a presentation this evening. It is a proclamation declaring July 2021 as Parks Make Life Better Month. And as our former Parks and Recreation Commissioner, I thought it would be nice if Mayor Pro Tem Newsom presented that this evening.
Right. It's always hard to do it virtually, but give me a minute here and I will read the proclamation.
And I think Jennifer, is Jennifer Fanning with us tonight? Maybe she's in the attendees. Luke, if you want to pull her on, that would be great. And whenever you're ready, Mayor Pro Tem.
Proclamation. July 2021 is Parks Make Life Better Month. Whereas Parks and Recreation promotes physical, emotional, and mental health and wellness through organized and self-directed fitness, play, and activity. And whereas Parks and Recreation creates the economic vitality of communities by providing frontline jobs, childcare for the essential workforce, and promoting community revitalization. And whereas Parks and Recreation creates memorable experiences through engaging virtual and physically distanced programs, dynamic online events, and new learning opportunities designed to keep families active while stay-at-home orders are in place and beyond. And whereas Parks and Recreation fosters social cohesiveness in Atascadero by celebrating diversity, providing spaces to come together peacefully, modeling compassion, promoting social equity, connecting social networks, and ensuring all people have access to its benefits. And whereas Parks and Recreation supports human development and endless learning opportunities that fosters social, intellectual, physical, and emotional growth and people of all ages and abilities. And whereas Parks and Recreation strengthens community identity by providing facilities and services that reflect and celebrate community character, heritage, culture, history, aesthetics, and landscape. And whereas Parks and Recreation facilities, community problem and issue resolution by providing safe spaces to come together peacefully and as serving as key points of service, helping our community heal both physically and emotionally. And whereas Parks and Recreation sustains and stewards our natural resources by protecting habitats and open space, connecting people to nature, and promoting the ecological functions of Parkland. And whereas Parks and Recreation supports a safe, vibrant, attractive, progressive community that makes life better through positive alternatives, offering and our recreational opportunities. And whereas Parks and Recreation remains versatile and innovative in providing vital services to our community through local, national, or global emergencies, all while adhering to guidelines set forth by governing agencies. And whereas the City of Atascadero recognizes the importance of access to local parks, trails, open space, and facilities for the health, wellness, development, inspiration, and safety of all residents of the community, and for being a respite for our citizens impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. Now, therefore, the City of Atascadero hereby proclaims the month of July 2021 as Parks Make Life Better Month. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And Jennifer Fanning, love to have you on. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Moreno and Councilmember Newsom. I appreciate that. It is such a pivotal time for us, in all aspects, but getting our community back outside and comfortable and active has been a goal of ours from the start, in a safe way. And so it's been really exciting to open our doors back up and to see our participants of all ages excited to be there and excited to be participating. And what do we have next? And so the tag for our California Park and Recreation Society is that parks make life better. And we absolutely believe that across the state is our push. So it's been an interesting year plus for everybody. And we had a lot of support through the California Park and Recreation Society. So this July being the Parks Make Life Better month and the proclamation, I appreciate it so much more because it is so important and now more than ever. So I appreciate your time in that and we're excited.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you to you and your entire team and all that you're doing. It's been a very challenging year and a half, and we appreciate you hanging in there and all that you're doing for our city and our community. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are now going to move on to our consent calendar. And the consent calendar contains items that are considered to be routine and non-controversial by city staff and can be approved in one motion unless there's a member of the public or a member of the council that wishes to pull an item for further discussion. So I'll look to my council members to see if there's anyone wishing to pull an item on the consent calendar. Seeing none, I will go to the webinar and to the phone. If there's anybody on the webinar wishing to pull or comment on a consent calendar item, you can raise your hand to do that. And I will, if you're on the phone, you can press *9. I'm not seeing any hands. Luke, do we have any callers?
We do not.
Okay, and I'll ask our city clerk if there's anybody that has written in that has any comment on the consent calendar.
There is not.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Well, we had a motion by Councilmember Darras, so can we get a second from you, Councilmember Borbeau?
Yes, I'll second that.
All right, and our city manager comes on, so that always tells me to pause.
No, I'm just trying to be prepared for the next item.
All right, roll call, please.
Councilmember Daris,
Yes.
Councilmember Borbo,
Yes.
Councilmember Funk,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom,
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, now we have a very ready city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry about that. Can you see my screen with the PowerPoint there? Thank you. So the first thing I want to talk about is city council meetings. So starting August 10th, we're going to try a new hybrid combination meeting for both in-person and virtual attendance. So members of the public, members of staff, members of the council will be able to attend meetings either virtually, in person, and certainly members of the public can also participate by phone or sending emails in advance to the council is always another perfect way to attend. We are caught up in some of the microchip shortages that other people are seeing, so it may be a little bit rocky as we try and hobble some things together without the right equipment. But we are going to go ahead. August 10th, we'll be holding some form of in-person, and members of the public are welcome to come participate in the council chambers. The next item I have on my agenda, I want to tell you about a new restaurant that's open. Go Thai is now open. They are still in their soft opening phase as they're trying to gauge the amount of interest they have. I will tell you that I went there Friday night, Saturday night. Downtown was so busy. I ended up going to Go Thai for dinner. Which was absolutely wonderful. The food was wonderful, very nice personnel, very efficient. We tried a whole bunch of different things and they are all good, which is always just a surprise. Usually when you go in and try a bunch, there's usually one or two you go, I didn't like that as much. Not the case. So the former Thai-rific restaurant is now Go Thai. It is open and I encourage you all to stop in soon and give it a try. Speaking of giving it a try, Farmers Market Summer Sizzle Series, a lot of fun. It's great to hear music again out here on the Sunken Gardens on Wednesdays. So it will be held again tomorrow, Wednesday, July 14th here at the Sunken Gardens. Like I said, lots of chefs and opportunities, recipes, and music. So please keep coming out to our Farmer Market Summer Sizzle. We have Ice Cream Zoofari coming up. Ice Cream Zoofari is always a must-do event, and we're very pleased to be able to have it again here at the zoo. Saturday, July 17th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. with lots of great music, fun activities, a wide variety of all-you-can-eat treats featuring delicious ice cream from Doc Bernstein's. Of course, you get to visit the zoo animals too. And your ticket for the Zoofari event includes zoo admission along with all you can eat ice cream, sundaes, yogurts, and topping. So a great night. Our summer concert series is returning to the Lake Bandstand on July 24th and throughout the summer from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Lake Bandstand. These concerts feature great local bands and a wonderful variety of music styles, and they're always free and open to the public. A special note, on Saturday, September 11th, which is Patriots Day and the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we will move the Saturday concert from the Lake Park to over here at the Sunken Gardens in City Hall with a very special evening of patriotic music and a flyover by the Australia Warbirds and much more. So mark your calendar for the summer concert series, and September 11th, we'll have a special one here at the Sunken Gardens. Cruisin' Weekend is back. So this is a very exciting 2-day-long event. The weekend will kick off Friday evening with the 28th annual Hot El Camino Cruise Night beginning at 6:30 with hundreds of beautiful classic cars cruising up and down El Camino. And our 5th annual Dancing in the Streets will be back on Saturday evening from 5 to 9 p.m. The dance party will be sure to have lots of terrific music and a great variety of live bands located throughout the downtown. This is so much fun talking about all the events that are now back and going on this summer. It's wonderful. Movies in the Gardens is back. So we'll have some great family friendly movies again this summer right here at the Sunken Gardens on Saturday evenings in August and September. Bring your kids, some low back chairs and blankets to sit back, relax, and enjoy a warm summer evening with Movie Under the Stars. All of the movies start at 8 p.m. One more event I want to give a plug to. In September, we are going to have the annual Cornhole Showdown. That's going to happen on Friday, September 17th and 18th. This year, we are partnering with Paso Robles and the Paso Robles Ravine Water Park. They'll be holding an event Friday night where you are eligible for some nice prizes. And then Saturday will be the big tournament where you can win some cash if you win the tournament. And then the proceeds will go to, I think, the Knights of Columbus and the Kiwanis Club, as usual, that do a lot of support here in the community. So proceeds, actually, there it is. Proceeds benefit Boys and Girls Club and Boy Scout Troop 51 through Knights of Columbus and Kiwanis. So wonderful event. We're looking forward to it. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thank you, Rochelle. So exciting to see that everything coming back.
Yes.
Any questions of the city manager? All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will move on now to community forum. This is the portion of our meeting that is reserved for persons who are wishing to speak to the council on something that is not on the agenda tonight, but over which the council has jurisdiction. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and we do ask that you state your name for the record. Anything that is brought up during public comment does not become an item of discussion amongst us here this evening. We will allow a maximum of 30 minutes for community forum, and anybody who would like to speak, go ahead and raise your hand in the webinar or press *9 on the phone. I'm not seeing anyone, so I'll give another chance here. Raising the hand in the webinar, or Luke, if we have anyone on the phone who's wishing to speak. I'm not seeing the hand though.
We have no callers at the time.
Okay, well, seeing none, we will go ahead, going once, twice. All right, we'll go ahead and close community forum and bring it back to the council and on to our next item. And this is a public hearing, item B1, a community facilities district annexation that actually is a continuation from our last meeting. And I will quickly go around the Zoom room here to see, do we have any ex parte on this item? Just
nothing additional.
All right, so seeing no ex parte, neither do I have any. So this will be our Community Development Director, Phil Dunsmore.
Good evening, Council. Well, thank you, Mayor. Yes, this item actually was brought to the Council May 11th of this year, just to introduce the intent to annex for this Community Facilities District. To bring up my screen, I'll just show you a couple really quick slides. That'll help us out with the hearing process tonight, which is primarily also led by our city clerk. So bear with me just a moment. Let me see if I can, I'm not seeing the option to share my screen, but oh, here we go. All right, let's get that up. All right, this is known as Community Facilities District number 23, if you can see my screen there. It's at 10850 El Camino Real. Again, it was May 11th that we approved that intent to annex resolution, which establishes the annexation boundary. It sets the date, which is tonight, for that actual annexation. And the annexation boundary was also recorded at the county recorder's office. So just a little bit about how this process is going to go. We typically start with opening the public hearing. We close the public hearing and consider Resolution A, which is the establishment of the annexation. We close the hearing and then a landowner election is held. A city clerk will announce the result of that vote, and then the city council certifies that election and introduces for first reading draft ordinance A, which would authorize the special taxes for this, what we call annexation number 23. So at this point, I would like to be available for questions on the project itself or the community facilities district in general. But otherwise, I would like to pass this on to Laura, our city clerk.
Well, I will ask council if we have any questions of Director Dunsmore. And just so the public knows, this is a pretty routine item. So if you don't see us asking questions, it's because we're pretty familiar with this type of thing and not a lot of questions to be had. So seeing none, I will hand it over to our city clerk.
We have the ballot, so we'll go ahead and open it.
So do you want me to open public comment first?
Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought maybe you had something else to say. Okay, wonderful. So I will go ahead and open up to public comment. So if you are on the webinar here and you would like to speak, please raise your hand using the raise hand icon at the bottom. If you're on the phone, you can press *9. Luke, do we have anyone on the phone?
We do not.
All right. Seeing no speakers, we will close public comment and bring it back to council. And I will ask for a motion to approve draft resolution A.
I move that we adopt draft resolution A.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Newsom and a second by Council Member Funk. And we will now recess to give you, Laura, now a chance to count the ballots, correct?
Let me go ahead and do roll call on that one,
Okay.
and then we can recess. So Councilmember Funk,
Yes.
Councilmember Borbo,
Yes.
Councilmember Daris,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom,
I'm muted. Sorry. Yes.
and Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay, so now we'll give the city clerk a moment to count the ballots for the annexation.
Yes, I finished opening. We have one property owner vote worth one property owner, total votes of 4. All 4 votes were in favor.
Thank you. Any comments by council, or I would ask for a motion to approve draft resolution B and introduce the draft ordinance. So do I have a motion to approve draft resolution B?
Also move.
I'll second.
All right, I've got a motion by Councilmember Borbo, and I'll take that second by Councilmember Funk. And I want to ask our city clerk, are we making the correct motion simply to approve draft resolution B, and then you'll read the title of the ordinance, or how exactly does the motion need to be stated?
Yeah, if you want to adopt draft resolution B and introduce for first reading by title only draft ordinance, then we can go ahead and do both in the same motion.
My motion, I
Okay,
move that we do that.
okay,
Yes, the second is good for that.
okay, great. So the motion by Councilmember Borbo, second by Councilmember Funk, and the city clerk will now read the title of the draft ordinance.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Atascadero, California, authorizing the levy of special taxes in Community Facilities District number 2005-1, public services, including certain annexation territory. Councilmember Borbo,
Yes.
Councilmember Funk,
Yes.
Councilmember Daris,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom,
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, so now we are on to our first management report, item C1, which are the pickleball courts at Colony Park for the construction award. And we will hand this over to our Public Works Director, Mr. Nick DeMar.
Thank you, Mayor Moreno. Can everybody see my screen here?
Yes, we can.
Great. Let me see. Here we go. It's a little bit of background on this item. About 2 years ago, the city was approached by the Atascadero Pickleball Club about potentially building some courts at Colony Park Community Center. And this is a sketch of where those courts were proposed to be located near lift station number 13 there. So we actually have gone through now and bid the project. So we have 4 courts being constructed. We put out the project for bid. We got bids back last week or a couple of weeks ago, and got really competitive bids. So the low bid was submitted by Kirk Construction at $173,143. And they range up to just shy of 263,000. So the second low bid is actually about $30,000 more than Kirk Construction by R. Burke. We did receive a bid protest by R. Burke related to some administrative omissions on Kirk Construction's bid, really related to if a corporation submits a bid that they need to list the president, secretary, treasurer. They only listed the treasurer, the president on Kirk's bid, but the president is also the secretary and the treasurer. So there are some bid irregularities are non-consequential and may be waived by the city council. The courts have ruled on this. And attached to the staff report, I did include the bid protest by R. Burke, and I also included the city's response to that. That goes into a little more detail. But the submission did not give Kirk any sort of advantage or benefit that any of the other bidders did not have. So with that, we're going to be recommending denying that bid protest. Kind of going back, one of the big discussions we had through this process of these pickleball courts and, how much should the pickleball club donate and how much should the city contribute? We kind of look back at previous city park funding projects, and you can see here kind of the cost participation that the city had versus the community group. And a lot of these, actually, the community groups did a lot of them, especially at the, with some of the smaller bocce ball courts and petanque and horseshoe pits and whatnot. But then there's other ones, kind of the heavy lift projects, if you will, like the plaza, the Atascadero Plaza across from Sunken Gardens, Centennial Plaza, also Stadium Park easement, the city purchased, and the Paloma Park was also purchased with all city funds. The Atascadero Pickleball Club fundraising, and I'm sure there's going to be a number of them that are going to want to comment on this item, and they can give city council an update where they're at. But as of last week, this is kind of where they're at. They're going to provide court surfacing for the project. That's an in-kind services of about $12,000. They're also going to provide nets and posts, lock boxes, blowers, and other needed equipment. They really want to take a hands-on approach to maintaining and taking care of this court, much like the horseshoers do or the petanque folks do, which is great. But all the non-cash contributions there would tally up to about 17,000. These are estimates, by the way. And they also have notified us that they have cash donations on hand of about $30,000. So if you add those up, about $47,000 they have available. And as I mentioned, they might have an update on that number tonight. So the city, committed $150,000 in Parkland facilities fee funding for this project. With the $30,000 is about 180. Although that the low bid is below this, there's other costs that go into project funding. We've already spent about $7,000 to date with the design, getting soil borings surveying, things like that, bidding out the project. There's going to be some of that inspection, test materials testing and other work that will be needed during construction. And then we also always try to have a contingency. We hope we don't have to ever spend these contingencies, but there's always unknowns that come up, especially when you're excavating or doing work like that. This is located on the top of the Atascadero Creek bank, so makes me, usually those soils are not the best soils for constructing pavement on, but we do have a good pavement design. But this is also the old wastewater treatment plant, so there could be things buried that we don't know about. So we always like to have a little bit of contingency, but our standard we try to go for on most of these capital projects is 20%. So if we add those up, it's $240,000 is what we're looking to budget for this. So with a 150 from the city and a 30 from the pickleball club, that's about 180. So it has about a shortfall of funding of about $60,000. So what are some of the options that we can look at to make up this $60,000 shortfall? Well, one, you could reject the bids. We don't recommend this. We got a really great price from Kirk Construction, and really it's a great time to bid. If we rebid it, pricing will come in higher most likely, and just it's kind of that catch-22. We could delay the project, and by doing this, we have time to award the bid. We have 60 working days from the time of the bid opening to award the bid. That's our timing. That could be extended if mutually agreed upon by the city and Kirk Construction. That means we would have to award the bid sometime in August or one of the meetings in September. So there's some time, and that time would maybe buy the pickleball club, more time to fundraise, or for us to kind of figure this out and how to, make up that shortfall. We could loan the option C, loan pickleball club funding. So city council could ask the pickleball club to continue to raise funds to cover the shortfall over a longer period than this, that extends beyond September. This would require, you could still award the project, but have them pay it back through fundraising efforts or, tournaments or whatever it might be. Option D, you could charge court fees. So this would be something that we'd have to set up. There's courts out there that you can just put coins or money in and it unlocks it, or it could be something like that, or it could be something where we're renting them out, at a standard fee, or it could be we rent out exclusive use of the courts for certain times of the day or week to the pickleball club. They, pay the city those fees. So, and then option E would be, the city could just fund that shortfall. If this is an option that the city council would look at, we'd recommend Parkland facilities fees. These are constrained funding that can only be spent on park and park improvements. And sometimes if we don't have enough money, it's not unusual to go negative and then just, pay it from the general fund, then repay the general fund after, those monies come in. Parkland facilities fees are the fees that are paid by developers when they have a new development. And then any option or combination of these options, B through E, could be looked at. So the recommendations tonight, reject the bid protests of our Burke and award the contract to Kirk Construction for $173,143 to construct the pickleball courts at Colony Park project, and authorize the city manager to execute the contract on behalf of the city council. Then also discuss and direct staff on desired alternatives for funding sources for amounts exceeding appropriate amount for the pickleball courts at Colony Park project. And then thirdly, authorize the Director of Administrative Services to appropriate $60,000 for the pickleball courts at Colony Park project from a funding source to be identified. Recommendation 2, I'm guessing, will be the lion's share of the discussion on this item tonight. But with that, I can take any questions that the council has.
Great. Director, could you go back to the page with the funding? Yes, right there. So really what we're looking at, I not that any of us have had a conversation about this, but I suspect we will all want to accept that bid because it is a great bid. So what we're really looking at is the shortfall. If you could go back. Yeah, thank you. The funding shortfall of 60,000, which of course, you know, in an ideal scenario, as this plays out, we could, you know, it's hopeful that maybe it's only the 26,000, but we just don't know. We've got that 20% contingency in there. So we've got to plan for that. And that's what we're doing tonight is, you know, somewhere in that 26 to 60. Of course, I mean, it could be more than that. We certainly hope it's not, but this is what we're looking at here. So just as folks are watching, I want you to understand that, you know, yes, that 20% contingency I know looks large, but we're hoping to not have to use that. And we'll keep some fingers crossed, but as director laid out that, you know, there always is that possibility and we have to safely set aside that contingency, or at least, you know, potentially expect that so that we're not surprised down the line. With that, I will open to council questions. I think I saw Councilmember Daras and then followed by Councilmember Funk.
Thank you, Mayor. Nick, I'm looking for your opinion on something on the bid. This bid was prepared in, I think, May, just recently. As we all know, the construction costs for materials have gone up significantly over the past year, or probably just the last 6 or 8 months. How much of that affected this? And is there any chance, they are on the decline from what I understand, the cost for certain materials. I don't know if necessarily for something like this, but how much of that could potentially affect this cost of construction, you know, whether we delayed it or not? I mean, would that, is there a chance that this would actually come in less in the final product?
I think there's a chance. I think, you know, the lion's share of this is a court construction. So it'd be the concrete work that would go into building that. There's also labor and equipment with excavation, grading, things like that. So I wouldn't expect the cost to necessarily go down too much. I know concrete has been kind of a hot commodity lately. There's a fly ash shortage, and that goes into concrete. So they've had to really kind of scramble to find another recipe to make that concrete. And Kirk has been, they last did the plaza across from Sunken Gardens, the Atascadero Plaza that was just recently done, and they gave us a very competitive bid on that. And I know they're located here in Atascadero. They like working in town. They like working for the city, and you know, that's always sometimes results in a favorable bid as well. But we've had really good working relationship with Kirk, and I think they just were very competitive on this bid. But I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think cost would significantly go down. My experience is it usually goes up. It's hard to rebid a job and then have the cost go down. And if we do rebid the job, we are mandated to only be able to rebid it if we do some changes to the project. So there need to be some kind of design change or something else to give us a reason to rebid, not just because we didn't like the bids.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Funk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Nicholas, let's stay on this slide for a second. I see in the lower half of the spreadsheet, the $30,000 cash donation from the Pickleball Club. Where does the $17,000 non-cash contribution come into play in those numbers at the bottom?
Actually, in the numbers at the bottom, they do not. So these would be costs that would be above and beyond the project construction. So you can see on the top of this page, there's court surfacing that they've, my understanding is they have a contractor that's willing to put the final court surfacing on top and paint it. And then the nuts and posts, these would be, you know, it's more like site furnishings, if you will. Like, you know, getting a bench or whatever. So you build or like bleachers or whatever. And then lock boxes, blowers, and other needed equipment. That's also another item. So these are estimated costs. They're not, you know, these aren't costs that we could put towards that $60,000 shortfall, but those items are not part of the project.
So the reality is that the total estimated expenditures are understated by about $17,000 of additional things that need to happen that are
Correct.
being contributed, and the contribution of the pickleball club is also understated by that amount.
That would be fair to say.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand the numbers. And then on the bid protest, I know, like a number of my colleagues, you know, I own a business and I send in those forms to the Secretary of State each year to certify the leadership of my corporation. And it took about 60 seconds to look up the information that you supplied as to the identity of those persons. Is what we are looking for in the form asks for that information about the secretary and the treasurer. Is that simply those additional positions that would be reported to the Secretary of State, or was there some other information that we were looking for there?
No, it's part of our bid documents, you know, have specific things that they ask for, you know, as just part of that. And if a bidder that submits a proposal is missing some of those, it could be deemed non-responsive. So they're not addressing all those things. You know, but this is like really a big irregularity. So it's not any kind of substantial, you know, missed information that would have given Kirk any kind of a, you know, advantage or benefit or anything else. So, you know, talking with the city attorney, you know, neither one of us think that it's worth the you know, the bid protest. And so that's why we would recommend rejecting it. And a representative from our Burke may, you know, be on the public comment and maybe can lay their case out to the city council.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
I guess I'll follow up with Councilmember Funk and ask what our previous precedent is with bid protests.
Yeah, usually, you know, with the bid protest in our construction documents, it allows the bid protest has to be received within, I believe it's 3 days of the bid, 3 working days of the bid. And then also it allows, we need to make this recommendation to the city council. The bid protester has an opportunity to lay out their case to the council during the public comment period of this item. And then it's up to the, and you know, the low bidder, if they want to say anything or refute whatever the protester does, then that's fine as well. But ultimately it's up to the city council to make that decision.
Has it happened before where line items have been left blank in previous bids with other contractors?
I'm sure it has, and maybe nobody has protested that. You know, really in this case, the president who signed on behalf of Kirk also is the secretary and the treasurer for Kirk Construction. So, you know, it could have been easier, you know, possibly easy just to put /secretary/ treasurer after the president. But our city attorney may want to weigh in on more on this if you want more information.
I'm just curious of previous precedent. And then my other question for staff is the Atascadero Pickleball Club still doing fundraising to assist with this construction?
I think their fundraising has been ongoing for several years now, and it's been ongoing, I believe, since the city, committed $150,000 towards the project last year. So they've been actively working towards that. They've been coordinating with city staff and keeping us up to date on their progress.
So at this point, their cash donation may increase from 30,000 if they're still doing fundraising.
It could, yes. I mean, and that's why it's some of these options that are laid out is delaying it till maybe August or September, or loaning them. That one other option about loaning them kind of some of the money and having them pay the city back for it. I mean, it provides maybe another opportunity to buy them time to get more donations. And I'm sure some of the members of the club can speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Borbo.
Yes, yeah, and I expect the members of the club to speak to that. But along those lines, option C, you indicate, is essentially, in order to take advantage of the bid, get the project done, the city, may have to cough up the funds initially, but, we effectively could do that in terms of a loan to the pickleball club and expect them to pay back through continual fundraising. Have you discussed it all with our city attorney or anybody regarding what form such an agreement might take?
I have not.
Okay, because I think that's something I'll like to see addressed, but that's all my questions for now, Mayor. I can wait till after we hear from the pickleball folks.
Okay. I'm curious if any of our staff members who have seen this happen before, been in other cities, what really is the likelihood of, I think it's a bit of a stretch to think that members of the community are going to want to give money to pay back the city. I mean, quite frankly, once the city has paid for something, I don't think there's a lot of people going, yeah, let's help pay back the city. And I don't mean that the pickleball club wouldn't want to genuinely do that. I'm just thinking in that, fundraising effort that might be a little challenging. And I don't know if, Director, if you or others have seen that work other places, and maybe I'm just a little skeptical and don't need to be. Maybe speak to that.
The last one that I can think of is Atascadero Land Preservation Society for the Three Bridges Oak Preserve. We provided a bridge loan to them while they were working on getting their grant from the state, and then they repaid us a couple years later. But that was, it wasn't when I say bridge loan, not for a bridge, but bridging.
Right, to wait for the financing to come in from the grant, correct. But it wasn't, they didn't have to go fundraise to repay the city. It was an actual loan where we knew that grant was coming in.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's probably about the closest thing I can think of. Maybe the city manager knows another time that might have happened.
Councilmember Borbo, did you have something to say there?
Yeah, I did. And I mean, the day of the ribbon cutting of Parents for Joy Playground, there were substantial donations being made, to the project. And also I'm curious though, along these lines, because I think your concern is valid, Mayor, and that's why I'm wondering about the structuring of the agreement. But along these lines, you mentioned option D, charging court fees. I guess one of the things, you could consider, or I'm asking you if you could consider, is combination of C and D, of saying, okay, we'll have to front this in order to make sure this happens on a timely basis. But we expect the club to continue to raise money. And if that doesn't happen, then we might have to resort to charging court fees or something like that. And that would provide an incentive, if that could be done. I'm asking you if that could be done, something along those lines, to say you need to keep raising money for this project, or we're gonna have to, find a way, such as through court fees, to make up a shortfall.
It sounds like, Director, that it would be an option. You said any combination of B through E. So when we get to that point of deliberating, of course, after we've heard from the pickleball club, that is something we could do. Is that what we're seeing, Ms. Rickard?
Yes, exactly. You
Okay.
can use any combination thereof.
Okay. Councilmember Funk.
Yeah, do we have an approximate cost of what it would be for the city to set up the mechanism to charge court fees and to administer that on an ongoing basis? Ballpark?
I do not have that. We were unable to get that information in a timely manner. I would imagine that obviously there is some extra infrastructure and other things that we do need to buy in order to lock the courts and provide codes and combos and such. But I would imagine that it'd be in the $1,000-ish range, but that is honestly a swag. We were unable to do the research. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yes.
I totally understand that. Do we have any sense, and this maybe the club might have to guess that too, but of what kind of money might be raised in a fundraising tournament? I mean, I'll be happy to be out there and be part of it and let myself get plastered by whoever wants to beat me. If that will help.
Charles will do it. He's really good.
Certainly you see that some tournaments are extremely productive and do generate a lot of fundraising, but I think that would probably be a better question for the club itself. Certainly, things like the Cornhole tournament we see and other things are very successful fundraisers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm not seeing any other questions. So here's what I want to do for public comment on this. I know that normally when we're in person, everybody can kind of raise their hands, and I tend to take a little bit of the temperature, if you will, of the room and ask, who here is here in support of the project, and maybe who here is against it. I can't imagine there's anyone on here against the project, but I will start there because it'll be easy. Is there anyone on this webinar that wants to raise their hand and say, I'm not a big fan of this? Feel free to do that. You don't have to. Not seeing anyone. So here's what I'd like to do. Before we're asking anyone to speak, I would love for you to just raise your hand if you're here in support of pickleball and you want to say, I'm a supporter of pickleball. Go ahead and raise your hand at the bottom of the webinar there. There we go. This is one of our highest attended meetings, by the way. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Anyway, 14 of you. All right, that is fantastic. And of course, if there's anyone on the phone, if you wanted to press *9 and we'd know that you were there. And Luke could tell me that there were some folks there. Anyone there, Luke?
We have no callers at this time.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, wonderful. So go ahead and put your hands down. We can see we've got more than a dozen people here on the call who are in favor of pickleball. So thank you all for joining us this evening. So as we open for public comment, here's what I want to ask. You've heard some of the things that we're talking about. Clearly, none of us seem to be moving in the direction of rejecting the bid or delaying the project. We're going to need to look at how do we make up this shortfall? Could it be fundraising? Could it be court fees? How do we do that? So what would be really helpful to hear from you is information in that direction. We're already sold on pickleball. We know it's wonderful, so we don't need to hear all of those statistics. You're more than welcome to share them with us, but it doesn't help in our decision-making process tonight. So I would really ask that you, if you're willing to constrain your comments in a direction that help us talk about this funding shortfall. And if there's, I know that Ms. Sims is on the line, and I know you kind of head up the pickleball club, or you're one of them. You might want to start out, and if there are others that you want to add to it, please feel free to, or if you just simply want to come on and say, I agree with what everyone said, but don't feel the need to, repeat all of the information. So with that,
Yeah, Mayor,
yes.
this is Brian here. I would suggest that you ask if there's anybody from the R. Burke Corporation, which filed the bid protest, on the line, and if they wish to speak before you hear from the pickleball public.
I can certainly do that, Mr. Perrick. Thank you. If there is somebody here from the R. Burke Corporation who wants to speak to the bid protest, go ahead and raise your hand, or if you happen to be on the phone, you can press *9. My apologies, we all got carried away with pickleball. I'm not seeing a hand. If you are, I'm not seeing the last name, but of course it could be someone entirely different. Luke, is there anyone on the phone?
There is not.
To speak. Okay. So there does not appear to be anyone from R. Burke here to speak to that. Thank you though for bringing that up, Mr. Perrick. So with that, I will ask those wishing to speak on this item to go ahead and raise your hand. And we'll start with Ms. Sims. And you'll have 3 minutes, by the way, for your public comment.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Nick, if you could put up one of those screens you had, the one with the costs and the breakdowns for me, please. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something that Councilman Funk asked earlier. The court surfacing, the nets and posts, all those things are needed to construct these courts. The cash donation is the cash, but the 17,000 we are also paying for. There are things that need to be paid for in order to see these finished. And so it's really 30,000, as it says, plus 17,000 that the club is contributing. I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. Also, late last week, I talked to the Midcoast Geotechnical, who does the testing of the concrete and the core drilling and the to make sure the compaction is correct on the once it's been graded. And he has given me a figure that the club is willing to pay for as well, lowering those inspection testing and construction administration fees. So that's in addition to the 47,000 we would be paying for. Also, the equipment that we're buying would alleviate the city of any upkeep whatsoever on these courts. The club is ready and willing to move into an agreement with the city, much like Little League has, to take complete care of these courts. Would not include city maintenance, would not be involved whatsoever. We would take care of that whole thing. Also, the club is currently still raising funds. We are still paying for club court fees. Since COVID was open and the gym was opened again, we have started to collect fees once again for the club, and the club gives 40% of those fees to the city. So there is an ongoing stream, so to say, of passes that we sell, drop-in fees we collect, all those things that we share with the city. Also, I just might add that we have not been approached at all about any kind of loan for the pickleball club. And I don't know anything about a type of loan to the club. So that is something that would definitely need to be discussed. The shortfall funding, of course, we hope we don't have to use that $34,025. It's there as a maybe. The $60,000, I was told there is money in the Parkland fees account to make up the shortfall. We were told back, we could come back to the council if we needed more money to ask for more money. So that's what we're doing now. And we ask that you fund it and get this going. This is for the community. This is not just for our club.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. You are at 3 minutes.
Thank you. And if you have any questions for me, please feel free. I speak for the club as the president.
We will definitely keep you on hand for that. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? I will look to the hands. You can press that raise hand at the bottom of the webinar. Mr. Oslin.
All right, got to remember to unmute. Good evening, Council and Madam Mayor. In just what's going on in the radio and Paso, which is our neighbor to the north of us, and how they're approaching pickleball, I'm fully in support of whatever we need to do to get the pickleball courts built in the city of Atascadero. I think maybe we should explore TOT funds as well. It will bring people to the city of Atascadero for tournaments outside of San Luis County. That's hotel revenue, that's restaurant revenue, that's people in our downtown. So I think however we need to do it, we should get it done. And if we need to loan money to get it done this year for next year, I think that is the most sensible thing we can do. The pickleball folks are very good stewards of our community. They help keep an eye on the Joy Playground. And we are absolutely in favor of getting the pickleball courts up and running. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oslin. Who wants to be our next speaker? All right, I'm not seeing anyone in the webinar raising a hand yet. Luke, do we have anyone on the phone who's pressed *9 who would like to speak?
We do not.
Okay, and because there could be some questions, as Ms. Sims indicated, is there anyone, if I could just see by a raise of hands, is there anyone on council who has questions for anyone from Ms. Sims from the Pickleball Club? Okay, Councilmember Funk, could you let us know what your question is? Councilmember, we'll bring Ms. Sims back on.
Sure. My question is the one that I posed to staff earlier, which is what kind of money might we look to if we had a kickoff fundraising tournament? What kind of take does the club think might be workable from such a tournament?
Okay, so yeah, Ms. Sims, if you could come on, because I know kind of what you said is you'd like the Parkland fees to make up the shortfall, and we're kind of looking here to say, you know, we want it to be a little bit more equitable than that, and so we're trying to think of creative ways, and Councilmember Funk is one of those ideas of a potential tournament or what could be done. So what are your thoughts on that or anything else when it comes to the fundraising aspect?
Well, we would like to have a kickoff ribbon cutting tournament where we involve council, maybe fire, police, get them all involved. I know the community is so supportive of course, our police and fire department, and to see them get involved in something like this, I think would draw a lot of people. We can't put on a tournament, of course, until they're built. So all the other cities around us have put on tournaments. They've been very successful, drawn people from the Valley, up from Santa Barbara, down from Monterey. They make a lot of money. They make gobs of money, but we have never had a tournament yet. So I really can't tell you how much. I can tell you that last year in club fees alone to join our club, we had over 60 members who paid $100 each. That was $6,000, and we gave 40% of that to the city. So that's going to happen again January 1st. And we have even more than we had last year. So we're still sharing that money with the city. We're giving it to the city. I really don't know what to tell you, Councilman Funk.
I do have a question for you, Ms. Sims. You had mentioned the money for Midcoast Geotechnical. I think when I spoke with our city manager yesterday, was that amount $2,500?
It was considerably less than what was in the what was estimated to be.
Okay.
If you look at the breakdown of Nick's Nick's page on there. He's got,
Nick, you want to put up that page for us and let us know where that, does that come out of? What, is that in the inspection testing?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't really know what 25,500 entails, but the testing and inspection portion of it, I was given a quote by Geotechnical, Midcoast Geotechnical, that they would charge us as a club $2,500.
And Director DeVar, is that, I'm assuming, because I see construction admin, so they're obviously, that's a 90%, higher than, or, they're talking 10% of what we're showing here. Could you let us know what we're looking at compared to what Midcoast Geotechnical is able to do?
Sure. Yeah, Midcoast Geotechnical on our street projects and other projects that involve pavements or earthwork or whatever, we usually have testing on those projects, or if there's materials brought in. In this particular case, the concrete is going to be one where they'll have to make concrete cylinders during the pouring of the quartz, and then they cure them for 7 days and 14 and 28, and then they crush them, and that tells us how to make sure that the concrete meets our specifications for strength, compressive strength. So that's something like Midcoast Geotechnical will do, or they'll do compaction testing on prior to pouring the quartz and things like that. So that's just one piece of that. The other piece would be inspection. So during construction, having an inspector out there documenting the progress of the work, things encountered, stuff like that. City staff, processing pay applications, doing administration, close out, all those other things. So this is just a budgetary item at 15%. We don't have actual, or that's just a standard 15% that we often will put in there. It's probably high, to be honest, for this project, because this project, or it could be right on, I'm not sure. It's just hard to say, but this project is going to be, probably done in about a month and a half, I'm guessing. So does it need full-time inspection? Probably not. We could probably have an inspector pop by there, a few times a day or during critical times when they're doing certain work like pouring the quartz. And the city manager, I believe, would like to add on something.
Nick's just always extremely optimistic. As he says, it covers all those costs plus the cost of bidding, advertising, legal costs, and a number of other things. As much as we always want it to be less than 15%, it does tend to come in there. The inspection portion, the materials testing, and the part that Midcoast Geotechnical does usually does run about 1 to 2% of the construction contract. So the $2,500 price is about what you would expect for this. So that works well.
Okay, so that 2,500 is really part of that 25,500.
Correct.
And I know that, I think for folks that aren't used to looking at these types of things, it can be a little bit frustrating to see this, well, this 15%, this 20%. The thing is if we didn't have that in there and it ended up coming out higher because of things that couldn't be anticipated, then it's, we're worse on the other end because, everybody gets frustrated that it's so much more and we didn't plan for that. So, based upon, prior experience and history, how things work, we try to give that best estimate that we can. And that's why those percents are in there. We don't just throw it in there to try to make it more expensive. We're really trying to give a good estimate so that we're not, caught short down the line. Anybody else have a question for Ms. Sims? Councilmember Borbo.
Yeah, I do. And I know we don't formally discuss ex parte, but I've had, a number of discussions with Barbara Sims over the last couple of years. So Barbara, we've talked about, the club's willingness to continue fundraising, and that fundraising in some ways could get easier once ground is broken, because then you point to the you can point to there it is, or it's happening, as opposed to it being a a plan and a dream. And what I'm, wondering is kind of looking for a reiteration that, the club is willing to continue to try to fundraise, so that all of the additional cost above and beyond the 150 that we set aside doesn't all fall to the city. And I understand the concern about the term loan. I mean, we're not talking about a formal loan per se, because I'm looking for a commitment in some way that the club will continue to try to fundraise.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The club will always continue to fundraise. We want to have everybody involved in it. We will absolutely continue to fundraise.
And I'm wondering, what we do as far as, how we put that down in writing, if you will, as to the, and what might be realistic to expect the club to be able to fundraise.
And I think maybe that's something we ask our city manager, what would, if we wanted to go the loan route, what would a loan look like?
Right, and I think a loan may not be the right term from a
Right,
financial or legal perspective, but effectively we're talking about city fronting some money in order to make sure the project is completed. And if I could ask Mr. DeBar real quick, what time frame? I think you mentioned it and it just maybe passed me by. What the time frame would be? If the contract's approved tonight, the council approves the awarding of the contract. What is the time frame to where the court would be finished enough that the pickleball club would be paying for that surfacing and those nets and stuff to get it really functional?
Yeah, so if this was awarded tonight, it usually takes at least about a month before the contractor breaks ground. So in an ideal world, that would be, mid-August. And then I believe there's 30 or 40 working days, I can't remember, but there's about 20 working days in a month. So, and it's usually a little bit more than what they really need to do it, just before liquidated damages kick in. So if you figure about a month and a half to construct, you'd probably be starting in mid-August. That would go through the end of September. So sometime in October, I would guess.
And I do believe the concrete has to cure for 30 days before we could surface it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, but so given how long, we've been talking about it, that's actually pretty quick. In other words, we're really in the light at the end of the tunnel. So, cool. All right. Thank you. Thank you both.
So then I would ask our city manager if we wanted to have some sort of a commitment from the pickleball club that they would raise another X amount of dollars towards this. How would that look in our, again, the terminology we're using is loan, but what is it really, so that we can talk to Ms. Sims about that and they understand what we're saying?
Basically, that's what it is. It would be some sort of written agreement where, it sets out the expectation for what we expect their efforts towards fundraising to be, probably some targets that you would like to see over a period of years to do that. You are correct. Loan is probably a little bit scarier. Certainly if I was a board member of the pickleball club, I would wonder, does that make me liable? That is not what we are looking for. What we are looking for is some sort of agreement towards targets for continued fundraising towards the cost of those courts.
Thank you. And I would ask Ms. Sims, do you have any questions about that, about kind of what you've heard us talk about in terms of a potential agreement, anything that you wanted to add to that?
It would be an agreement that I cannot enter into tonight without going back to my board.
Of course.
I don't have the authority to do that, of course. We would need to know what time period you're talking about, and then when the project is complete, what the actual monies were.
Of course. Of course. Yeah. Okay. Well, wonderful. I think that exhausts our questions, and I will, we still have public comment open, so I will give it one more ask. Is there anybody else in the webinar who wishes to speak to this item or on the phone, you could press *9. If you're in the webinar, you can raise your hand. All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and close public comment. Thank you, Ms. Sims, for being so available for us, and bring it back to the council for discussion. So maybe put up our options there, Nick. And I think we probably know where we're settling is clearly, I would say none of us are in for A or B, correct? So we're maybe all looking at, you know, the potentials of C, D, you know, C, D, E, maybe some combination of that. Maybe just kind of get a run through where, just a quick straw, maybe where is everybody on this? Who'd like to start us off? Go ahead, council member, or was that Darius?
Yeah, I was going to make it real quick.
Sure.
I'm satisfied with a combination or a workup of C and E, but I'm not comfortable with charging court fees for something like this. But I would like to see the pickleball club commit to continuing to raise funds, however this would be worded in an agreement, and then of course, and then the city making up a certain portion of it, whatever we can agree on. But that's it. Thank you.
Okay, got it. Councilmember Borbo.
Yeah, I had a kind of a question and an idea of thinking out loud is, Ms. Sims mentioned that, you know, certain fees are charged and then that they are remitting 40% of those to the city. And that's, I think, you know, those are charged under kind of the form of recreation type fees, if I'm not mistaken. And that 40%, I'm not sure if that 40% is common to other club activities, and whether or not perhaps as part of the agreement is if, you know, if the club didn't come through in fundraising, maybe that percentage could be increased or something. Just trying to ensure that there's some skin in the game, if you will, on the part of the club to continue fundraising. And I would, when you were asking for taking temperature, I mean, I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm not set on this number, but would look at, you know, the club maybe coming up with half of the unfunded amount, and we hope that instead of being 60,000, that unfunded amount will be a lot less.
Okay, Councilmember Funk.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see this thing move forward as an asset for the community, not just for the club. And it's a sport which has a pretty broad range of appeal within the community. It's something they're teaching at school. It's, you know, it's something that the seniors are doing. So it's not a narrow constituency. So I want to make this fairly simple to move forward, which to me suggests that the city is in a position to handle the risk of the contingency in a way that would be very difficult for the club to know what they're getting into. So I would say that the city picks up whatever has to be, you know, whatever contingency ends up being spent, that we would be on the hook for that and leave the club out of that. And then consider something that is a share, and recognizing the contributions that the club is making, that maybe it looked to me, I did some scratch numbers while we were talking, and on the assumption that there's probably maybe $5,000 less in the admin and testing, based on Nick thinking that the simplicity and speed of the project, but you know, not a huge discount from that, but a little less. That we're talking about a remaining difference of about 21 grand. And I wouldn't want the club to pick up more than half of that. I think we could do some, you know, 2/3, 1/3 or something kind of sharing on that difference, and pick up the contingency and get this moving.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
I'm kind of the same census to kind of split the difference. I'd like to see the organization continue doing fundraising, but then I'd also like to see working with the city and getting the final numbers. Once we get those, then we can determine where we are. But I think it's a combination of both C and E.
Okay, so I think we're all along the lines of C and E. I'm thinking what sounds like, I didn't, Councilmember Darrows, I didn't get an idea of numbers from you. But if we're generally looking in the range of, say, a 50-50 split and maybe a not to exceed amount that we would put on the club. So as Councilmember Funk said, we, you know, the contingencies, we don't want to put too much onto them. Certainly the city can more easily absorb that, although, you know, we're certainly not an endless an endless stream of money, even in the Parkland fees. So maybe Nick, bring back those numbers again. Like the 20, let's see. So basically we're really looking at the construction contingency. If we take that away, we're really looking at about 26,000. If we minus the 2,500 that the club would be spending, putting towards mid-coast, right, that would come out of the 25.5. So then really we could be saying, you know, looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 23,500 without a contingency. Does that sound about
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. So how do my colleagues feel about splitting that difference with the club, and then maybe the city would handle any contingency that comes up?
I'm fine with that.
That sounds like a good work to me. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I can work with that, and we should be prepared to do what we can individually and collectively to help make it easy for the club to raise those funds. You know, if we get a couple of years down the road and it's clear that you know, this is not going on, then we can revisit the question of some kind of court fee arrangement. But I think that we could help them make it happen.
I'm sorry. I'm okay with that. Although, to be clear, Mayor, you're talking about half of essentially the what's left of the 25.5, or are you talking 23?
So if we look, yeah, good question. So if we look at the funding shortfall of 60,000 and we remove the contingency, construction contingency of 34,025, 34,025, you're left with 25,975. The club is paying 2,500 towards that inspection and testing. So if we take 2,500 off that amount, we're left with 23,475. We split that in half, it's 11,737.50. And so then I would say, and we don't want to go exact amounts because it could certainly be less than that. But I think what we want to be able to say in some sort of a motion is that we want to split the cost as estimated here. Okay, if it's less, then certainly we would be splitting a lesser cost. But if we go into that construction contingency at all, whether we go in $50 or we go in 34,000, we would be willing to say that the city would cover that contingency. So that's what I would propose.
Yeah, and so just to clarify that, the way you've broken that down, it kind of lowers our commitment of 60,000 to about 45. I think if I did my math correctly on that.
The city's city's potential commitment, correct?
Yeah, if the contingency comes back in, so it goes from 60 down to 45. Obviously, that's better for us. I certainly would like to see this done. I think this is a great thing for our community to have. So I think that's nice, creative accounting, Mayor. I think it works out well.
Okay, so I will ask our city manager then if one of my colleagues is willing to make a motion. How would you need to hear that so you have the information you need? Because we're looking at some sort of agreement over a number of years, and I don't think we want to determine that tonight. We'd like you to sit down with the pickleball club and find out, okay, if we're looking at, you know, up to 11,737.50 or what, you know, again, I'm not going to put that number in stone, but if we're looking right about $12,000, I'm just going to round it, about how, you know, how do you see being able to fundraise for this, about how long might that take, and work with them on some sort of an agreement for that fundraising effort.
Okay. So what I would recommend is that council first reject the bid protest of R. Burke and award a contract to Kirk Construction. So recommendation number 1.
Okay.
And maybe if we could just do a motion for that separate, And let's do that one if we could.
Okay,
I move to reject the protest by Arbor Corporation
Second?
and award to Kirk Construction.
and award the contract to Kirk Construction. Yes, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Daris, second by Councilmember Funk. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Daris,
Yes.
Councilmember Funk,
Yes.
Councilmember Borbo,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom,
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
And then our desire would be to,
Go back if you could, Nick. So then I would authorize, you've already discussed and directed staff. I would authorize the Director of Minute Services to appropriate, let's see, hold on one moment. We'll call it $45,770 in Parkland Facility Fees Fund and $14,240, which is the $2,500 for the Midcoast Geotechnical that they've agreed to pay, plus the $11,737.50. So $14,240 from the pickleball donations, and direct the city manager to work with the pickleball club to come up with an agreement for those funds.
okay, so here's the other thing. I also would like to see us get that $30,000 before we sign the contract. So how do we go about doing that?
You could just direct me to not sign the contract until we have a $30,000 check from the pickleball club.
Okay, so on that point, do we have a consensus to make sure we have the $30,000 in hand before we sign the contract to move forward?
Sure.
Okay,
I would think so, but I mean, I would want to make sure that the club has no problem with, offering the said 30, that they can produce the check for the 30,000 very quickly. But I had a question for the city manager on what you just stated.
well, so just one second. I would say that the not to exceed 11,737.50, because if it happened to be lower than that, we want to make sure that it's that 50-50 split. So let's say there was no contingency and it actually came in 10% lower. We want to make sure that we're splitting that difference and we're not encumbering them for the 11,737.50 plus the 2,500.
Okay.
I'm going to do something I don't normally do, but because this is a little bit time of the essence, I'm going to open up public comment to hear what Ms. Sims has to say about that 30,000. So I'll go ahead and open up public comment, and Ms. Sims, you've heard what we're discussing, and
It's in the bank. It's in the bank and it's cash. We
All right.
have 30,000 on hand in the bank.
perfect. And so the club would be willing and ready to write that check before we sign the contract.
I can hand you the check and she can sign the contract. Absolutely.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. And because I've opened up public comment, I have to open it up fully. So if there's any other member of the public wishing to comment on this item, you are more than welcome to. And seeing none, all right, we will go ahead and close public comment, bring that back. So it sounds like we've got consensus on that, Rochelle. So Councilmember
I do have a
Borbo,
question
you had a
for
question?
the city manager and the wording of. Yeah, and my question is this, Rochelle, we're talking about appropriating a very specific amount, and yet the $34,000 20% contingency, that could come in at nothing. It could come in at 20,000. It could come in at 50,000. And we've discussed by consensus that we, the city, will cover that contingency. So, shouldn't it really be worded that that the city will cover, and then the Director of Administrative Services is authorized to appropriate whatever the construction contingency is, and then half of that other cost.
So we need $60,000 budgeted in order to go forward with the project. Otherwise, if I don't have that number, I have to come back to the council. So you are budgeting it, the contingency, but you're not necessarily expending it. Your discussion tells me that the city will cover anything that comes up in those contingency costs, any change orders or those types of things. You know, you will cover that cost. So that's telling me that for the budget purposes, we're saying, okay, to get to the total project budget, $45,000 is going to come from the city. An additional 14 is going to come from pickleball. That's at 2,500 plus the 11 to come up with the 60. And then you're directing me to do an agreement, and the agreement is basically the city will cover all contingencies. The city and pickleball will split. City will cover all contingencies. Pickleball will cover Midcoast geotechnical, and the city will and pickleball will split any remaining costs or shortfall 50-50, not to exceed 11,737.
Okay.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Nick, are those numbers right? I shouldn't ask Nick that. I should ask Rochelle that. Yes, the CPA, not the engineer.
If you ask me some calculations, I can do that for you, but
Yes. Yeah.
That's hilarious. So yeah, I mean, basically, Rochelle, what I'm doing is I'm taking 60,000 minus 34,025 and then dividing that by 2.
Yes.
Do it one more time. Oops. Oh, minus,
Yeah,
sorry,
minus
minus
2,500.
2,500. Thank you. I was like, dang, that didn't work out. 425, 2,500 minus divide by 2. Yes, 11,737. So the motion is, which I will make, I move that we appropriate, we authorize the Director of Administrative Services to appropriate $60,000 for the pickleball courts at Colony Park, the Colony Park project, that contingency, any contingency that comes up be paid 100% by the city, and that the $2,500 to Midcoast Geotechnical will be paid for by pickleball, and any remaining amount will be split 50-50 between pickleball and the city at an amount individually not to exceed 11,737.50.
And that the city funds will come from the Parkland
The
facilities.
city funds will come from the Parkland Facilities District, yes.
Perfect.
Do I have a
think that
second?
works.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. We have a motion by Mayor Moreno, a second by Councilmember Funk. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Funk,
Yes.
Councilmember Borbo,
Yes.
Councilmember Daris,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom,
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And all of you that are on the line, if you want to raise your hand, just to like you're waving your hands and say happy, feel free. We're all have jazz hands. We feel you. So we're very excited to get this project moving. We appreciate the fundraising that you've done. We appreciate that you're talking to places like Midcoast Geotechnical and seeing what you can get and what you're putting into this. We really appreciate that effort. We know this last year with COVID has been very tough on fundraising efforts for everybody. And so we thank you that you have continued through, and thank you to staff for, wow, what a great bid we got. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to moving forward and playing pickleball and watching council members Funk and Borbo go at it. All right.
I challenge you.
So now we will move on to item C2, the Del Rio Ranch General Plan, Zoning Map and Specific Plan Amendments and Master Plan of Development. And this is our Community Facilities Director, I'm sorry, our Community Development Director, Mr. Phil Dunsmore.
Actually, I'm going to just give you guys a little quick on this one. It involves the motion. So basically what this is, usually once we introduce an ordinance, then we take the adoption on consent. This one, when we introduced it at the last meeting, there was a bunch of different recommendations. And so what we just want to do is make sure that we clarify staff believes they understood and what we put into the motion on the introduction encompasses what the council meant, and that the council did understand that in introducing the draft ordinance, that language that they were adding to the specific plan was actually part of the draft ordinance, because the specific plan is a exhibit to the ordinance. And so in introducing the ordinance, they were introducing the ordinance as amended. The specific plan, the exhibit, which was the specific plan, was being amended. So with making a motion here to adopt the ordinance, then you're just confirming that what we put in there and what we did is correct, and that new language is being added to the specific plan. So that's all this is.
Thank you. And so just for the public, this is something we went over in great detail. This was a big item at our last meeting. I had a lot of conversations about, and as the city clerk said, there were a lot of things within that motion, some things that we did, and this is just making sure that legally the intentions that we had as a council are stated correctly, and that we're voting on that in the way that it needs to be. So I'm going to assume we probably don't have any questions, but I will ask council if we've got any questions on this item. Seeing none, and of course it always gives an opportunity for public comment, and that is always a good thing. So I will open this up to public comment and see if there's any member of the public wishing to speak on this item. And if you're on the phone, you can press *9. Not seeing anybody, so we will bring that back, and I will ask for a motion.
I will move staff's recommendation.
I'll second.
A motion by Councilmember Funk, second by Mayor Pro Tem Newsom. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Funk,
Yes.
Councilmember Borbo,
Yes.
Councilmember Dares,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom,
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Let me kind of gauge where everybody stands. We're not that far into our meeting, but we're going to get into our general plan update discussion, which is very high level discussion. We're not diving down into the details, but how is everybody feeling? Anybody need a bit of a break, or should we go through this item?
I'm good for now. That could change in 15-30 minutes.
All right, we'll play it by ear, but so far we're looking good. We're doing well. So we will move on to our general plan update preliminary discussion. And this will be our community development director, Mr. Phil Dunsmore.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening again, Council. Please bear with me. My Zoom, for some reason, has been freezing up every now and then. So if I freeze up on you, you'll know why. Anyway, this is the moment we've all been waiting for, our general plan update. We are officially starting that process. And this is more of a pre-start. This is about what's to come in the future. This is the story about what we're going to be doing for the next couple of years. Although we're not actually starting tonight, but we're starting to talk about it tonight. So let me share my screen here. And all right, can we see that? Our lovely city map. Lorelei is going to help us out a little bit too. She's going to be talking about some of the things here tonight, but we wanted to give you a broad overview of the process, the project, where we're going to go, what the next steps are, and what to expect as we get through this. Let's see if this can work. It's going slow for me again. All right, I'm going to try and make this quick, but I do want to give you a bit of trivia just to start out. The first general plan for Atascadero was actually developed in, and I'll give you one hint, it was prior to city incorporation. It was the same year I was born. So any guesses on that? You can write that down. But we won't waste too much time. We can come back to that one. I'll fill in that gap for you pretty quick here. Yeah, so it was 1980 when a year or two after our city incorporation, which we actually adopted our first city general plan. And of course, we're working off our current general plan, which was adopted in 2002. So we're about 20 years in. So it's a point in time when we really approach what's called build out. Anyway, back to that very first question, if you haven't guessed already, that year of that first general plan was actually 1968. That was under the county jurisdiction, they made what was called an area plan for Atascadero, which was a precursor to our current modern day city general plan, which is just over 50 years or so ago. I don't know, I'm aging myself now. So why now? Why are we doing this general plan update now? As I said, a lot of our policies we've sort of burned through. We're approaching what we call our general plan build out, which means that it's time to take a close look at our land use element, our zoning. It's time to take a look at our infrastructure, and it's time to plan for the future for Atascadero. And this update is going to provide us with opportunities for economic development, sustainable growth, and an opportunity to look at our infrastructure, water, wastewater, roads, everything else, maintain our safety and quality, while also really gauging community input. Where's our community input today? So we're going to look at our existing policies that we have adopted. They're not all bad. They're not all out of date. But we're also going to engage our community and our council to really modify these policies and get something that's going to carry us through 2045. Feels like an overwhelming task. It's really not. I've gone through this process before, and I think it's exciting to have this council guide us through this process as well, and have our community help us allow out that as well right now. This typically takes about 2 years. A big chunk of that time is the environmental review process. And it's that environmental review process that tends to take a big chunk of time, because we have to look at how this impacts our resources, how it impacts our environment. Lorelei, was this where I was going to hand this off to you to talk about it, or was it the next slide? I forget.
I believe it's the next slide. After when we get into
it's the next slide.
I'll take over the element.
That's right. We're going to talk about it there. So really roughly, just on a broad basis, the timeline. Here we are. We're in July 2021. But between now and August, we would like to put together an RFQ, a request for qualifications, to acquire a project consultant. And once we acquire that project consultant, that's where this project really begins. Because then we're going to come back to the city council, come back to the planning commission, and really hold a scoping meeting. And that scoping meeting, what that's about is, what do we really want to look at? What level do we want to get down to? That's where we talk about the details and evaluate what we want to evaluate. So that's really where we start the process. We look at all the things, and that'll carry us through the end of this year. And in January, we'll really begin the visioning and goal setting. A lot of the public outreach will happen around that time. Then, as soon as the middle of next summer, we really talk about developing a plan and starting an environmental review process based on that plan. That environmental review process typically takes a year, and there's additional public hearings, and we're looking at final adoption sometime in 2023. Real quickly, I want to jump back to that RFQ process. We can, and this is an option, we can bring an RFQ, a draft RFQ, back to the city council in August, or you can just guide staff tonight for us to start that process, to start that consultant selection process. And obviously we can bring some more information back to you. And then our next meeting essentially would be to meet with that consultant and then hold the scoping hearing if we decide to proceed that way. We'll talk about that option a little more a little later. But outreach is definitely going to be, a very substantial process for the general plan update. We need to have a robust outreach process. We still need to design this. We've already started a web page. It's going to have obviously all of our current general plan information. It's going to have our future information, how to get involved, how to subscribe to project updates. We're also going to have a big social media presence. We're also going to have a lot of in-person outreach opportunities where we are able to go out to communities or bring people in and have that kind of a style of community outreach. So what are we going to use to kind of supplement all of this work? Well, already we've gathered a list of zone change requests. That's from people that want to change their zoning on their property. So that's a little piece of this, but it helps us understand where the public wants to go. And we've been talking with those folks over the last couple of years, and we can still continue to take more of those requests. We're fortunate that we just got through our housing element update. And that'll carry us through 2028. So we can simply incorporate that into this update. We are going to be bringing a version of the El Camino plan back to the city council for us to more formally look at that plan. And we can pull from the El Camino plan as well. We don't have to take all of that El Camino plan, but think of that El Camino plan as a concept car where, hey, you see that concept car, it never really gets built, but we take bits and pieces from it to actually put into reality. And that's how we see the El Camino plan, and we can use that for our general plan update. We've also done some other significant projects recently. The Del Rio specific plan is still evolving. We have a lot of large pending development projects that are still evolving at Del Rio Ranch in the south end of town at Dove Creek. We now have an official application with the Barrel Creek project, and we have several other housing projects. And all these projects help us understand where the current economy is going, where current trends are happening. We can incorporate that into our planning process. Then we have a whole series of new state laws we've got to deal with. But the exciting part is just new economic and retail trends. A lot's changed in the last couple of years. Some of those things are temporary. Some of them are long-term. We've got to look at that. We also have resource capacities we need to carefully evaluate, and we have to look at how wildfire risk is continuing to evolve. So these are all things that are definitely topics we're going to delve into. Real quickly, I just want to touch on the zone change requests that we have received. This is just the number that we've received so far. What is there, 10, 11 of them that we've officially received. And I'll just mention, and speaking to the public, anybody is welcome to submit a request. It doesn't mean it's going to get granted. It just means it's something for us to look at as we do the general plan update. And we've been telling folks that have been asking to do general plan updates that, hey, submit what you'd like to do, but we're not going to take action on those right now because we're in the midst of a general plan update, and we'd rather consider those with the bigger picture so we can evaluate it along with that. Not only does that save the applicant money and time, but it makes sense to look at all those comprehensively. And here's that list that we're currently looking at. All right, Lorelei, take it away.
Great, thank you, Phil. Hi, everybody. So the typical general plan is required to have 7 mandatory elements. And as you see here, we have 7 in our current general plan. Housing, we've just completed, yay. But we've grouped them, and any city can choose how they'd like to group their elements. And we, in the past, in our 2002 general plan process, we created a land use, open space, and conservation element. I've seen other cities do a land use and circulation element because they're closely tied and they have common issues. So it really is dependent on each city's current situation. So this is how our current elements are laid out. And, you know, there's a lot of other things we can do. There's topics that are unique to each community that you can cover. You can create new elements. And that's a really important thing to touch on. But really it comes down to what you want to put in each of these. So for example, land use, and you can do the next slide, Phil. So land use, just a sample goal, policy, and program. This is what is consists of our general plan. Goal number 1, you know, goal number 2 in our land use element, land use open space conservation element is preserve residential neighborhoods and the winding street line nature. So this really just alludes to the fact that in our 2002 update, our biggest priority was preserving the neighborhood fabric of our community. So this is a chance for us as a community and council members to look at our general plan and think about how things have changed. What considerations do we want to bring in? So I won't go through all of these in detail, but think about some of our most recent council priorities, such as focusing on downtown, for instance, or focusing on economic development. Those have been big topics we've been talking about and setting in our city priorities. So maybe we're creating goals either in a separate element that is specific to the downtown or a design, or maybe it's within land use to actually talk about how we want to, you know, create our downtown nucleus and grow that, the entertainment use and restaurant uses in our downtown, and how can we do that through policies and programs. So this is just a high level overview of some things that can go into our general plan. And you can see on the right hand side, the safety and noise element. We have a goal that says attain a high level of emergency preparedness. Well, when you drill down to it, the program that implements that is to provide required training to ensure the readiness of all of the response teams. So we go through that process, and each year city staff and some decision makers go to a FEMA training, for example. So we're always prepared, or every other year, prepared to respond to those. And that's a really important city priority that was set forth back in 2002. So again, this general plan update will give us the next 20, 25 years of strong ideas, and that will help carry us through when council members change and residents change and move and new ones come. It kind of sets forth who we are as a community and allows us to have a lighthouse that we keep heading for as our, on the horizon, instead of taking a left and a right every time something comes up. And so here we talked a little bit about optional topics. I mentioned downtown. We could, water is always a really hot topic in our county. Any of these ideas and so many more can be included in this. They don't have to become separate elements because, again, creating a new general plan element in addition to our mandatory 7 is expensive. It can cost more. We could try and do some of those things in-house. Those are all things we can think about and consider. We can support, the outreach effort of the consultant in-house to, so there's lots of ways to kind of create this general plan and make it our own. But I think we're going to talk a little bit later and kind of pick your brain on ideas and topics that you think are very important that we should consider including maybe in a request for qualifications. So really, like Phil mentioned earlier, this is the starting point of a really great discussion. Our next step will be to issue our RFQ and bring a consultant on board that will lead us through a scoping session. So we won't necessarily have a full scope of work until we bring somebody on and say, here's what we'd like to do as a community. Here's the ideas that came from our July 13th discussion and how we'd like you to kind of help us scope a discussion that will include X elements and be done in X number of years and cost X number of dollars. And then, so finally, we'd really like to just turn it over to you, and Phil, you can facilitate this conversation, but ultimately we'd like to talk about your thoughts on other additional elements, certain things that have come up that you think we should be considering, and hear a little bit from the community as well.
And thank you, Lorelei. And these aren't mandated questions to answer tonight, really. This is just basically wanted to lay out the process to you and tell you where we're going to be going. And if you'd like to give some very, very high level input, but we're just not ready to get down in the weeds yet. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I have a general question as it relates to this, like that number 1, are there optional general plan elements that we might want to consider, which I think that will come later. But what does that look like? For instance, like, let's say, just as an example, that the council and the community decided we want an economic development element. What does that look like versus economic development being within the other 7? I mean, particularly land use.
It's really, could basically equate it to another chapter in a book instead of one chapter covering multiple topics. So if you really feel like we have in our community, we're special in a certain area and we've got substantial discussion in that area, and we really want to set up a big discussion with goals, policies, and programs really specific to that topic area, that's when it'd be good to have a separate element. Otherwise, what you can do is take those policy areas, let's say, for example, economic development, and you can incorporate that into your land use element. You can incorporate historic preservation into your conservation element. You can incorporate water into your conservation element. So it depends how big of a topic this is to your community and how much discussion it really entails. But really all it means is it's essentially another chapter of the book, which we call general plan. It becomes its own element, just becomes a little stronger, a little more broad in its discussion. Not really much else to it, but it does entail additional time and cost on our part.
Right, and I understand the time and cost aspect. I'm just wondering, there cities that do that, there must be a benefit to it, otherwise they wouldn't, right? Because they're not going to incur an extra cost to have an extra element if they could simply put it all within the rest. So, and this might be a question that ends up getting answered by the consultant that we end up, engaging through the RFQ process. Because I at some point, and tonight probably isn't the night, I want to have an understanding of what is the benefit of something like that, to weigh that cost benefit. Because right now, all I see is a cost to it, but I assume there's a benefit. I just don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah,
but that's down the line. What other sorts of questions do we have from staff or from council for staff? Councilmember Borbeau, followed by Councilmember Funk.
Yeah, in terms of your comments though, Mayor, on about the optional general plan elements, I'd be hard pressed to understand why there'd be value in having a separate element. Yeah, and you mentioned, yeah, there must be some benefit or cities wouldn't do it, but sometimes cities do things for symbolic reasons, like, oh, this is so important to us. See, we made a whole separate element. And I'm not on that bandwagon. To me, the analogy better be would make economic development another chapter in the part of the book called land use. But my question is on the second part of this, what special consideration or request? What I have in mind, I'm wondering if this is an appropriate, viable question in terms of an RFQ, is in terms of the folks you're asking for the qualifications, is how, have they delivered on a timely basis? Because these things can tend to drag out. So they have they delivered? And it may not come in their RFQ. It may have to come from checking their references, I guess. But I assume that's an appropriate thing to try to search out, is have they, delivered on time and on budget?
So noted. Very good comment.
Okay. So it's a good, valid question. Okay. And again, for me, well, never mind. That's more of a comment again. So I'll ignore it. I'll wait. Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Funk, followed by Councilmember Darris.
All right, I have some thoughts about topics that we might want to make sure we get into, which would be useful to know that we need a consultant to address them. Would I be correct in assuming that the time for me to raise those questions would be after we've had public comment, and then we come back and have that discussion? Or do we want those now?
If you're giving direction, I would wait, but right now we're kind of more in the question phase.
Yeah. Okay. So so the timing would be, I think, be better on that if I do that after we've done public comment.
Okay. Councilmember Darris.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to follow up a little bit, both with what Mayor and Charles Bobro said. Additional elements, some may have value and some may just be symbolic. I wouldn't want to sit here and say, hey, you need this other element in here because I think it's necessary. So I feel that we should be asking staff, is there another element that should be added to this that you feel would help you do your job more thoroughly or easier or anything like that? I mean, is there something that you have in mind that you feel would be necessary to add to this?
And that's a possibility. And I think still we're not ready to answer that question tonight after really, I think after we really do an evaluation of our general plan and some conversation with the community and consultant, I think we might be able to more clearly answer that question at that point.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Good to keep in mind. Other staff questions before we open up for public comment?
I'm going to hold mine until after public comment.
Okay, wonderful. Well, then we will go ahead and open up for public comment on this item. And again, this is the very first meeting, the very first time that we've talked in any sort of real discussion about our general plan update. We've been alluding to it for a couple of years. We've put it into the budget to start doing it. It's a big item. And this is our first meeting to start talking about it. But as you've heard tonight, there will be much public outreach, much process that we will all go through, really working together to look at what is our future like, what is the next 20 to 25 years in Atascadero going to look like, and we're going to be doing that together. It's pretty exciting, I think. So opening up to public comment, go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and if you're on the phone, you can press *9. Looking for any hands raised, any input, any thoughts you have on the general plan update. Luke, do we have any callers that are wishing to speak?
We have a caller. We're screening them right now to double check which item they want to speak on. So it'll be just 1 minute.
And I'm not seeing any hands in the webinar. If there's anyone that would like to speak, go ahead and raise your hand, and we will also wait for Luke. Mr. Osland, yes. You are muted.
Okay, I'm actually not going to speak. I'm going to leave this one alone. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, Luke, do we have a caller?
I'm not, they're still being screened, so
Okay,
I apologize.
we have time. We will wait, no problem. If anybody wants to speak on it, we certainly want to give them the opportunity to do so.
So right now it's a perfect time to go lock up the chickens, which I will go do for you.
All right, yes, our caller is Randy Lawrence.
Yeah, hi. I have a question about with the general plan. I think I understand the importance of it. One of the problems I know with Walmart and I see ongoing with the Del Rio project is the freeway, the Highway 101. It's a pretty dangerous freeway right there at that curve, and I know that that's kind of beyond the purview for the most part of our city, but I really see it as a sticking point. I saw it as a sticking point for the Walmart development. I see it for a sticking point for any development going on in the northern end, which seems to be, major plans, and appropriately so. I know that deals with Caltrans and deals with the state, and I know that we don't have a lot of control over that, but I honestly feel that until we get that dealt with, it really makes developments up here tenuous from the standpoint of increased traffic going into that curve up there by the Home Depot area, and particularly if you put in establishments where people are eating and having alcoholic beverages that may impair judgment. So I just wanted to bring this forward and wonder if there's any way that this can be dealt with in the general plan. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. And last call, is there any other caller or anyone on the webinar that wishes to speak on this item?
We have no more callers.
All right, thank you, Luke. Seeing none, we will go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to council and staff. And Director, I would ask maybe if you to answer Mr. Lawrence's question. We're getting into a little bit more detail than we do, but let him know what we're doing in that realm when we look at new projects.
Absolutely. And every time we look at a new project, we have a traffic analysis that looks at all the potential traffic impacts of that project. Now, the general plan is no exception. It has its own, what we call a circulation element, which is a study of the entire city's road system, all of our infrastructure that serves that road system, and evaluates all of the future land uses in the city to see how we can build that circulation system, road system, to be up to date and as safe as possible for current standards. So all of those things get evaluated with this process on a much larger scale, but they also get evaluated with each large development project that goes forward. And it's part of the reason why the Del Rio specific plan has taken so long to move forward, because there has been very careful evaluation of the roadway system in that area, in addition to a change in economy. So
thank you.
Lots to do there.
All right, so as we're giving staff feedback, some of the things that we've heard are, we certainly don't want to pay extra money to have a symbolic element, yet we'd like to have a sense of what would be a benefit. Is there genuinely a cost benefit to an additional element, say like an economic development or something else that the council or community might desire? It would just be nice to understand that. And I liked Councilmember Darras's question about just, as we go through this, is there something that staff sees would be beneficial in that realm? And now I know Councilmember Funk, you have some topics that you would like to put out for consideration.
Sure. I think in the course of this, and I don't anticipate these are necessarily additional elements, but there's probably policies that might be discussed in the course of the plan, certainly topics that we should raise, and maybe, and you can tell me whether general plan is the right venue for them. But one of the issues is the impact of short-term rentals on our neighborhoods and our housing stock in the community. We've been monitoring that, the continued growth of Airbnbs and VRBOs, that kind of thing, how that's going on in the city. And we should be prepared for some thought about how that affects the neighborhoods that we're trying to develop and protect and nourish in this general plan. I think in that context, we should also think somewhat explicitly about child care as an element of the infrastructure of neighborhoods, and make sure that we are allowing for it properly and encouraging it in the plan, because that will be essential to both quality of life in our community and to the development of businesses and attraction of businesses. I'd like us to think about in terms of circulation and infrastructure, that broadband may be part of that. By 2045, we're going to need to, there's going to be a whole connectedness level of the world that we can't even imagine yet. But at least we should be thinking, as we're looking at broadband, that may be an essential element of our community's infrastructure going forward that we should plan for. And last, I know that we were able to kind of put the housing element to bed, if you will. But one of the things in there is that we have only a single neighborhood in the whole community that is designated to handle services regarding the homeless. And I'm concerned that puts too much burden on one particular neighborhood, and that we may need to be able, in the course of the time of this plan, to address a variety of strategies, that could help different kinds of homeless people or people in different situations, and that having a single homeless services or emergency shelter zone, overlay zone, is probably not enough for that. It places too much burden on a neighborhood. So we should be prepared to address, as we look at how the neighborhoods are constructed, at having additional locations where services of various kinds that work with homeless people might be offered, so that they don't end up as a default location, for example, next to the junior high school. So, thank you.
Any other comments from council on items of interest? Councilmember Borbo.
Well, yeah, I think, and I hope that what Councilmember Funk brought up are appropriate things, because when she mentioned short-term rentals, that's something, I've asked us to consider, and the impact of that in the past, and perhaps this is the best forum to do that in. But I'm also struck then by, Phil mentioned the phrase build out. And, when you have a general plan, there generally is kind of a build out capacity, at least mentioned in those things. It said, if all of this stuff happened, you'd hit a population of X and you'd reach build out. But as I understand it, that doesn't mean you stop building and you just say, okay, every property in the city is built upon, nothing more will ever happen. Especially when it comes to housing, you have to accommodate future growth. And over the years, this city has increased density in certain areas closer to the center of town. That used to be 1 acre or now half acre or a quarter acre or what have you. In some instances, things have gone from single family or from residential suburban, straight to much higher density. I'm assuming that in the land use element piece of this, there has to be some discussion about changing densities and where that might be appropriate. I'm also wondering, though, in terms of, because of what we can call the Amazon effect, it's like every city in America has more commercial retail zoned property than they'll ever fill with commercial retail establishments. At least as visualized in the next 20 years, who knows, maybe something will change. I'm assuming then that this would also be an appropriate place or an appropriate topic to address in the general plan update is, okay, what do you do with all these little small commercial retail zoned lots that are on El Camino that are, 40 feet wide and 100 feet deep, that sort of thing. That will probably never realistically be commercial retail. I'm assuming that the general plan update would be an appropriate place to address that. So anyway, and other than that, I along those lines, I pretty much agree with what Councilmember Funk stated there.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom, anything?
I think my colleagues have been very thorough. I'm looking forward to, as we get further into this process, really getting down into the specifics of the density and seeing where we're at in the development of our community.
Councilmember Darrows, anything else you wanted to add?
Muted.
I'm sorry, did you ask me a question? Because I got some noise going in the background here.
Yeah, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Oh, no, I'm good. All good questions. You guys are great.
All right. So I'll ask just Director and Lorelei, it sounds like probably the things that we've been talking about here tonight are things that would be included with a typical general plan update. I'm thinking that the only one I'm unsure about, the short-term rentals, is that something that would fall under a general plan update, or is that kind of a smaller piece that we as a council would need to decide that we're doing separately, and therefore we'd have to give staff direction and also say, put this on the back burner while we now go focus on this, because that is something we set up strategic planning. While it was something that's come up, we all decided that it didn't rise to the level of priority like other things did. Not that it's not important, but it just, we couldn't put resources there. So is that something that would naturally go within a general plan update? And you may not have the answer to that tonight. If it is, maybe that is something that gets looked at. But certainly all the infrastructure, homelessness, zoning, the densities, I'm really looking forward to getting that El Camino plan pulled together, as Councilmember Bourbeau alluded to. That I mean, we've had that for a while, and I've been really chomping at the bit to get that going. And I know we keep waiting for the general plan update, and here we are. So, yeah.
Well, let me answer a couple of those questions if I can, especially on the short-term rentals. That is something we could do some policy on, but generally most cities handle that with straight up code development. And we can put programs in. Typically that kind of a program or policy would come from the housing element, because it's associated with preservation of housing. It's also associated with, housing type uses, but it can also go in land use element, but it can also simply not even be a part of this and simply be a policy objective from the city council, or it can become a code in our zoning code. So that's one way to handle that. But back to Councilman Bourbeau's questions, density and land use and discussion about those things is certainly the heart of the topic of discussion for the general plan update. And we're going to be talking about new land uses, things we haven't had before with this update, because things have changed and the retail environment has changed a lot, and people are working from home, and there's different land uses now, and there's different demand now. So we've got to do land use and maybe create new zoning that's a whole different animal than what we've had before. So we're going to be thinking outside of the box to talk about these underutilized properties, to make sure that we can develop zoning for the next 20 years where they're going to get utilized. Another piece of that I want to mention is, if you look at the requests we're getting, the majority of those requests are for people to convert single family residential property into higher densities. So that kind of gives us some input as to where that demand is. There's a little bit of a request to take some commercial to go to residential, but primarily it's really just going from single family to multifamily, or from single family large lot to single family small lot, as we see the demand for more housing and more land use.
And Phil, would you say those requests do typically tend to be towards, the core of town? Like, we're not getting those out in the, 10-acre parcels that want to chop things up. We still have that elbow room that has been imagined.
Yeah. Primarily, all these requests are in areas that are in our urban services line. They're all in areas that are served by sewer. They're all in areas that are either close to El Camino or closer to the core, and they're not out in the rural lands, so to speak. But
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Funk, followed by Councilmember Darrows.
Yeah, speaking of sewer, to what extent would we need to take the current boundaries of areas served by the sewer system as a given? Or can we look at what it would, what might be involved in expanding that in some areas? So that we have more areas that could support.
That's a question I probably can't
areas.
answer tonight unless Nick wants to chime into that, but that's a question that's going to take a lot more analysis, especially as we're at a spot now where we're basically at capacity with our wastewater treatment plant. But thinking about what the next steps are for our wastewater treatment plant upgrade will tell us, you know, what else can we handle and what else can we handle topographically in our city in terms of being able to get the connection there. And so that's something we'll definitely be evaluating as we move forward.
Okay, and then the other thing is, is it possible to work with circulation and land use planning and housing in concerts together? I'm thinking, I was part of a meeting that Rochelle and a number of members of Rochelle and the police chief and Nick and I were all part of, with residents on Santa Cruz Road who were concerned about the speed limit on the road through their neighborhood. And the one of the things that came out is that that area doesn't currently have enough density of dwelling units to be classified as a residential street. But what if it were more densely developed, it would change the natural speed limit that could be applied in there, because it would be reclassified as a residential street. And so I'm wondering, can we, in the course of looking at this, I know it would, we've solved the housing element, but we still are going to have a lot of housing related questions in the course of developing this plan for how our community as a whole works effectively. Will we be able to look at those interplays?
Sure, that's what this process is all about. As we develop new land use areas and change zoning, that's a natural. We hope to not really fuss with the actual policies that we developed in our housing element because it's been endorsed by the state now. But we can take those policy directives that are in our housing element and translate those to our new land use and circulation elements to make sure that we're implementing our housing policies. That's really the way it should work, but they all work together and we have to make sure they're all going to fit together and we play with them all at the same time. So yeah, that will be an opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Darris.
And since we're asking some specific questions, I wasn't going to ask this, Phil, but I know that you and I have talked a little bit about single-family residential houses, or single-family houses that are built on multifamily zoned areas. They can't build a granny unit without building it out, and that sometimes is just not possible, but they could still have a granny unit. And is this the type of thing where obviously we're going to talk about in this, language? Is that just a language change, or how is that going to be dealt with?
Well, we'll deal with that in a couple of ways. We may even deal with that sooner than the land use element, because we've got two things coming up sooner than the general plan update. One of them is an update to our accessory dwelling unit ordinance, which we're going to be doing this year, which we've got funding and time to do now. And the other one is what's called small lot subdivision standards, which we also have funding for. And in fact, we're looking at consultant applications today for that. We've got a number of consultants that want to help us with that. We've got grant funding to work on that project. So both those projects will really help with answering that question and nailing that down, even if we don't address it with the general plan update. So we're going to get there even sooner.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, well, I will ask Director Dunsmore or Ms. Capel, do you have the information that you were hoping to get from us tonight?
Just need one thing, just one little thing. And that is, do you want us to proceed with putting together an RFQ and kind of getting that out there right now? Or the reason I ask that is the RFQ needs to sit out there for 45 days because it takes these folks a long time to really respond and get some quality product back to us. And it'll really save us a lot of time in the process if we get that out there sooner rather than later. But we also could bring it back to you on August 10th if we want to talk about this further before getting that out to seek that qualifications.
My sense would be that I trust you, the professionals, to go out and do that RFQ. I don't think that it needs to come back to us, and I'm getting the nods from council. So let's move it forward.
Great.
Awesome. All right, excellent. That was easy. Thank you very much. And we look forward to many more of these meetings talking about our future together.
Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and take a break now before our final item. I see 8:22 p.m. Why don't we come back at 8:30? Then we'll have our finish up our next item and announcements, and then we'll reconvene our closed session. All right, see y'all in 8 minutes. I'm seeing us at 8:30, so we are ready to come back and move on to item C4.
I'm here, Heather, just grab it.
Okay, sure thing. And let's see, Councilmember Funk, are you there? There we go. All right. So wonderful. We are coming back from a break and we're moving on to item C4, improvement and reimbursement agreement with NP Annex LLC for the Del Rio Road at 101 US Interchange Improvements Project. And this is our Public Works Director, Mr. Nick DeBar.
Thank you, Mayor Moreno. A little bit of background. I won't go into a ton of detail because my staff report did, but a couple of years ago, development at the northwest corner of El Camino in Del Rio was proposed, called Del Rio Commercial. And it includes a drive-through restaurant kind of up near the corner, and then another commercial building towards the back of the property. And it's kind of hooked into the same developer that did the Home to Suites, MP Annex, Clint Pierce. And anyways, we've been working with his design team for the last year or so, or 2 years, honestly, with getting coordinating the city's project with their project. So last September, the city council adopted the Del Rio Road and El Camino Real concept plans and plan line. What this does was kind of establishes the geometrics needed in the lane configurations on the corridor. This was the alternative improvements to the roundabout. And it also identified the needed right-of-way to accommodate those concept plans. Earlier tonight, through consent agenda, that right-of-way agreement is exactly related to this item. MP Annex, through those discussions with MP Annex, the idea of building some of those improvements that are part of the city's Del Rio concept plan came up because where the Taco Bell site was going to be situated was going to be heavily impacted if the city came in later to build a retaining wall. Funding for this is currently budgeted in this current budget, $1.5 million this year and next year. It's under Del Rio Road improvements at US 101 interchange. So this would be constructing a portion of what the city would be constructing as part of this project. And then the CIP also includes $7 million for that project. And then this agreement, improvement and reimbursement agreement, was prepared by our city attorney and reviewed by the developer's attorney, and was actually attached later as a separate item on the packet. So this is from the concept plan that was approved last September. Basically, the yellow areas identify the needed right-of-way, and the orange area there is that 8-foot maintenance wall access. Again, this kind of shows kind of superimposed with the proposed development. You can see where that retaining wall is right in the middle as a dashed line. You can imagine if that was built after this on-site improvements were done, it would have a significant impact on that drive-through, and the drive-through is a critical element for any kind of fast food restaurant. So that's where this whole idea of perhaps, since you guys are already doing improvements along El Camino Real that are conditioned with your project, perhaps maybe it would be makes sense for you to do these other improvements on Del Rio. And then it's not doing the entire right turn lane to northbound 101. You can see it tapers off, but all the embankment, all the storm sewer, everything will be done except that pavement. And I might add as well, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. Can you guys see my cursor at all? Just nod your head if you can. So the wall's gonna stop. All the work's gonna be in city right away. That's gonna occur. But there's gonna be some retaining wall that will be needed to be constructed by the city in the Caltrans right away when this road is widened out to that right turn lane. But this does take care of the lion's share and a significant portion of this improvement. So these reimbursable improvements, these are associated with the city's project. Developer improvements are associated with those conditioned improvements that the developer has to do along El Camino Real. And that's, if you read that in the agreement, that's what that means. But these are the reimbursable improvements, the retaining wall, a road widening and that taper to accommodate that larger radius, a storm drain and pipe across Del Rio, traffic signal replacement on the southwest corner at 7-Eleven. So part of their frontage improvements on El Camino will be adding a right turn lane towards the freeway on Del Rio. So by doing that, what we need to do is we need to replace that traffic signal next to on the corner of the Shell 7-Eleven and extend that mast arm so we can put new signals up there. It's also going to require a new curb ramp and some sidewalk. Also some miscellaneous traffic signal items, including 3 of the 4 video detection cameras and microprocessors, and then the audible push button upgrades. So they're conditioned to do 1 of those. And the idea is that when Annex East also comes along and Del Rio Ranch and these others, those in pavement detection are just going to be cut up over and over, and that signal will be in flash mode many times. So this video detection actually is pretty cool. It's basically a camera that's mounted up on the mast pole, and it detects cars, and it doesn't need to have those magnetic detection of the pavement. So we'd like to have all that done as well, all as one project. And then just other work, excavation, backfill, drainage, traffic control, mobilization, those other things. And then lastly, the engineering that they had to do, administration, bonds, encroachment permits, and other expenses related to those improvements. So this was in my staff report, and kind of shows kind of who's responsible for what. It was probably black and white in the staff report, but this maybe helps a little bit more. But initially, why this is kind of strange here is initially they weren't going to have a wide radius. This is to really accommodate the city's project. So what they're required to do really is all the curb, gutter, sidewalk, a lot of the pavement widening on El Camino. But this point forward is the city's responsibility. This is El Camino Real on top. And then also down on this corner by this Shell 7-Eleven, this is a city's responsibility. And then this is Del Rio on the bottom here in El Camino. So you can see most of all of these improvements are going to be part of those reimbursable improvements. We actually got an updated cost estimate from the developer today, their engineer. The total construction with a 20% contingency, we talked about that on the pickleball court item, is $686,862. And those other costs associated with design, coordination, and all of these other things, surveying, is another $76,475. So the total estimated reimbursable cost are estimated at this point $763,337. And as I mentioned, this is part of the circulation fees that are currently budgeted for the Del Rio improvements project. So tonight, the recommendation is to have council approve the improvement and reimbursement agreement with MP and Annex LLC to construct a portion of the Del Rio and El Camino Real improvements in the vicinity of the US 101 interchange project. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you, Director. It's nice to see this moving forward, and very pleased to see that we are doing something that is going to get going sooner rather than later, and that MP Annex is willing to do that work. Very grateful to them, and I think this ends up saving time and money in the long run. So glad we're thinking in that direction. I will look to my council colleagues for any questions. Councilmember Funk.
Yes, thank you. Does this have any impact on the timing and phasing of the Del Rio Ranch project?
No, it does not.
Okay. Does this project, by making this arrangement on how this piece of the work is done, does that change what the obligations are of various property owners to contribute to the cost of this work for the property owners that are part of the Del Rio specific plan?
Yeah, so this particular, the Del Rio commercial development is not part of the specific plan. So it is outside of that specific plan boundary. It kind of went around that. But with the specific plan cost, you know, they don't need to pay into those specific, but and maybe the city manager wants to weigh in on this one too, because that specific plan, or Director Dunsmore, that specific plan amendment kind of identified a lot of these improvements that need to occur to handle the anticipated traffic volume that will trigger. And this is one of those. And it could be that, you know, and we're really in the early stages of looking at this, these plans, but the Del Rio Ranch, you know, they might have to have this right turn pocket open or constructed prior to them really doing portions of their work. So, you know, they may have to construct it, or we may have to construct it, but one way it will get constructed and completed. But this handles a lion's share of that right turn pocket. It doesn't really look like it when it, or won't when it's done, but we're actually putting in guardrail up by the retaining wall because we're so confident with the design. And there was a lot of coordination between the developer's design team and Wallace Group, who's the city's engineer that's working on this. So we're really confident that we have good conform lines here.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, I'm still, I just want to confirm, and maybe this is a Rochelle question, but just want to confirm that by making this arrangement on how this piece of the work gets done, we're not changing whether this piece of the work gets done. This is going to need to get done. And we're not changing who's obligated to pay into the cost of doing that work.
That is correct. So this work is part of that work that is included in the specific plan. Del Rio Ranch and the Annex will still have to pay their fair share towards this work, as the city will be contributing its fair share towards this work too. So as those projects in the specific plan are built, they will be contributing towards this retaining wall and the work that's being done as part of this.
Okay, so the developer who's doing this work that's not part of the specific plan, they on a property that is not part of the specific plan, also owns property that is part of the specific plan and will eventually be part of paying back some of what the city paid to him to do this work because he'll have those shares.
That is correct.
Okay. This is a beautiful solution to it. I mean, this is a lovely, that sounds a little weird, but it's a win-win solution for efficiency and cost efficiency and for getting things moving smoothly for all of the business owners involved in this and to support our community.
And Councilmember Funk, if I could maybe just add something, the developer will be required to pay into the development impact fees, just like everything else. So some of those development impact fees will be going into the circulation fund that we're going to return and pay him out of. So it all balances out just fine, or it will balance out just fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then last, on the video detection cameras, I know there's, people are sometimes anxious about who's recording stuff for what. Are these going to be used for facial recognition or red light reinforcement or anything of that? Or is it just something that detects that, oh, 3 bicycles just came up, we need to turn the light green for them?
Yeah, it's the latter. So there's no recordation or storage associated with it. So it's just kind of a real-time thing. And it just detects cars or vehicles as they're approaching the intersection or queuing there. But there's no facial recognition. There's no license plate reading or anything like that. It's just simply detecting cars. It does the same thing as the wires that are in the ground, the magnetic detection.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions of staff? Councilmember Borba.
Yes, Nick, great answers to good questions. But I'm wondering about the role of Caltrans. I assume they're well aware of this and agree that this, plan line makes sense for the future northbound, turn lane, that sort of thing. But is there any risk that they come along and, screw this deal up or change the requirements later and mess it up in any way, shape, or form? They fully bought into this.
Well, they always can screw it up. It's only approved once we get it constructed. So right now, with our discussions with Caltrans, they seem to agree that this is a appropriate solution. And remember that that Hail Mary thing. If I always say, if Cabela's were to, if build on the Annex East, okay, and it's going to destroy the traffic on this corridor, that's going to require a bridge widening. So, so we've kind of gone down that path, but right now Caltrans, from our discussion and their review of these alternative improvements, they're agreeable to what we're pursuing.
Thank you.
Now we know what Nick would like to show up there at the southeast corner.
Yeah, I hope Director Dunsmore heard that. So.
Any other questions right now on this before we go to public comment? All right, seeing none, we will open this item to public comment. If you want to speak to this, please raise your hand or press *9 if you are on the phone. And I'm not seeing any hands. Last chance, Mr. Oslin.
Good evening, Council. Once again, Jeff Oslin. One question that I have is, where in the county do we have one of these stoplights with the cameras on them? So our city can already be proactive to KPRL in the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? Is there anyone on the phone? Luke, I don't see the hand next to it, but in case you see something, I don't.
We have a caller, but we can't get a hold of him to see if he wants to speak. So I'm going to bring him on just in case. This is Randy Lawrence again.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Lawrence, you're live with the city council.
Mr. Lawrence, did you want to speak on this item?
All right, I guess not.
No. All right. All right, well, we will close public comment and bring it back to council. And Director DeBar, maybe you can speak to Mr. Oslin's question about is this type of thing elsewhere in the county, this video system?
Well, we actually have a couple intersections currently that have this technology. One is at Santa Barbara in El Camino, and the other is at Traffic Way in El Camino. So if you see, they look like the old, kind of like from 10 years ago, like the old, I guess, security cameras that used to be on like buildings and stuff. They kind of look like that. They sit on the mast pole. Usually there's some pigeons trying to sit on it. so anyway, I'm thinking about Traffic Way, honestly. Down at Santa Barbara, they're down there. So you can see them. There's usually 4, 1 for each direction. And in there, it's, the traffic signal technicians go in there and adjust them as needed. Sometimes there's blind spots, like when the sun's coming up, that, there's always adjustments, but none of these do record anything. They're just real time detecting cars.
Thank you. All right, so if there's any questions or comments, otherwise I will entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of the reimbursement agreement with MP Annex for the construction of a portion of Del Rio Road and El Camino Real improvements.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Bourbeau, second by Councilmember Funk. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bourbeau,
Yes.
Councilmember Funk,
Yes.
Councilmember Daris,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Newsom,
Yes.
Mayor Moreno.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll now move on to council announcements and committee reports, and I will go according to the tiles that I see, starting with Councilmember Daris.
I have nothing to report.
Councilmember Funk.
I made a brief presentation to the Board of Supervisors this morning on behalf of my work as HSOC chair, recognizing Grace McIntyre, who's leaving a capslow and pursuing a wonderful opportunity for herself, and appreciating that work. I have Mayor Pro Tem Newsom and I have a design review committee meeting on Thursday, where we are looking at a colony house where the owners wish to make a substantial expansion.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Newsom.
As Councilmember Funk spoke, we have the DRC meeting. That's the only reportable items I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Bourbeau.
Yeah, tomorrow I have an Integrated Waste Management Authority meeting. My first meeting as the board president. We'll see how that goes. Some important things to discuss there since we lost our executive director July 2nd. And then on Thursday, we have a joint meeting of the Citizen Sales Tax Oversight Committee and the Finance Committee to discuss some things that our Measure D process called for us to have a joint meeting and talk about some things. And that will be over Zoom, so that's not an in-person meeting.
Okay. But that is open to the public.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Councilmember Funk, was there something you missed?
Yes, I neglected to report that I attended a meeting of the Groundwater Sustainability Agency for the Atascadero Basin. It's a quarterly meeting. And at that point, we approved for putting out for public comment the draft full sustainability plan for our basin. And that will be, it'll be a few more weeks yet before that shows up on the websites and infrastructure, because they're doing the executive summary. But there will be a public comment period for a couple of months, as if people want to look and see where we are in our basin, which is in distinct from the Paso Basin and in much better shape. but that we are putting together a responsible plan to keep it sustainable. And also in the course of that, some work is being done where helicopters are going to be going up the Salinas, trailing some large apparatus that does imaging for the various substrata of the geology supporting the groundwater basin. So if people notice that it's not black helicopters coming to get you, it is just a groundwater survey.
Wonderful, thank you. And I have nothing to report this evening. So last thing is, do we have any individual determinations? All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn our meeting, and we will move to closed session. Let's take a 5-minute break and meet there at 9 o'clock. And to the public, thank you for being with us tonight, for hanging in. And any reportable action from closed session will come to our August 10th meeting. Yes, Councilmember Morbo.
You said meet there. Are we going back to our closed session link?
We're going back to the closed session link. So leave this meeting and we'll go there, and we'll see you in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Good night.